Let's see what's evoked when we mix the chemistries of three very simple stories together. First is a story about Mola Nasruddin, who goes to the palace of the king carrying a chicken as a gift. And when he's standing in front of the king, he says, "Oh, great monarch, I went to the gambling hall last night and I used your name and I won. So I bought you this gift." Well, the king accepted the chicken with graciousness. The very next day, Mola Nasruddin came back again. This time he was leading a goat. And he said, "Oh, great monarch, I went to the gambling hall again and I used your name and I won, so I bought you this gift." So the monarch accepted the gift graciously once again. But the very next day, Mola Nasruddin was back again, but in the company with two very burly-looking ne'er-do-well hooligans. And he said to the king, "Well, I went to the gambling hall last night and I used your name, but I lost. So I owe these two 100 gold pieces." So the king paid up the 100 gold pieces, but as the Mola was leaving, the king said, "And don't use my name again." Then there's the time that a thief was apprehended right in the act of stealing merchandise from a certain store, and he was hauled off before the magistrate. But being a serial thief, he knew that this particular magistrate was a very pious and godly man. So when the magistrate said to him, "Well, what have you got to say in your defense?" the thief said, "Well, Your Honor, when I was in that store, the power of God came over me, and you know as well as I do that one cannot go against the will of God." So, smiling to himself, the magistrate raised his voice and he said, "Well, I can feel the power of God taking over me, and it's telling me to give you the most severe sentence." And she said, "Oh, please, Your Honor, please, Your Honor, just treat me like an ordinary thief." Then there's the story of two beggars who used to go every day to the king's palace. And the king would each day have his own personal baker, bake loaves of bread to give to them. Now, because the king liked to bask in his largesse, he would be present while this bread was being given. And each day, the first beggar would bow in front of the king and, using honorifics, say how grateful he was for this gift and the graciousness of the king. But the second beggar would always look up and thank God for giving the king the means to be able to give these charities. Now this aggravated the king. So he decided that he was going to teach the second beggar a lesson. So the next day he asked his baker to bake the 2 loaves of bread. But in one there was to be placed a number of gold coins, and in the other it would be just an ordinary loaf. Now when the bread was baked and it was time to go out to give it to the beggars, the king said, "Now you make sure you give that loaf with the coins in it to the first beggar." Oh, the baker said, "Yes, I will honor exactly what you say, Your Highness." And so they went out, and again the bread was given, and the first beggar giving his honorifics and his thanks and obeisances, and the second, as usual, offering thanks to God. But when they went away, and the first beggar noticed the weight of his loaf, he thought to himself, "This is a very badly baked loaf of bread." So, being heavy, he exchanged the loaf with his other friend, the second beggar, who very gratefully received it. And of course, when they went away, the second beggar rejoiced in this wealth. He would never have to beg again. The next day, the first beggar was the only one to front up for his loaf of bread. And so the king was greatly surprised, and he asked him, "What did you do with the loaf of bread that you were given yesterday?" And the beggar said, "Well, I found that it was heavy and obviously badly baked, so I exchanged it with my friend, the second beggar." What is it that rises up in you from the chemistry, the mixing of these three simple stories? What does the king represent in the first story of the Mullah? We know very well what the content of the second story means, plainly spoken. And what about the third? What was it that was brought to the awareness of the king? What do these three stories mean for you? Where does this lead us on? From the questions that were asked, we know what the seat of divine science is in our mind, where we examine and explore the ways of life. Divine physicist, the feeling and experiences of the emotions in our heart. And what and where is the seat of divine alchemy? becomes the relationship between the need to answer this question: what and where is the seat of divine alchemy? And these stories. As was said, we have to dive deeper to not only find the answers, but the connections, the nexus points between these realizations, because this is what they are, realizations. What's the meaning of these stories?